Chapter 6. Council with the King. Even with an entire flask's worth of smolder whiskey in his guts, numbing his pain and filling him with fiery bravado, Grog still found the trip to the Burgomaster's manor on the back of Thetham's giant ram to be an exquisitely uncomfortable experience. Thetham urged the beast onwards at a terrifying pace. It bleated and snorted, and its hooves clattered on the cobblestones in a way that would have given any dwarf a headache, let alone one who'd recently been cracked on the noggin with a dirty great mace. Grog sat behind Thetham, clinging tightly to the full-moon warrior, and muttering a constant stream of curses as his injured buttock rose, fell, and hit the hard leather saddle with each rhythmic gallop. Between the frantic movement, the whiskey, and the pounding headache, Grog also found himself fighting down waves of nausea. He decided that if he did need to throw up, he would do so all over the back of Thetham, who was shouting encouragement to the speeding ram and clearly enjoying himself. Luckily for both dwarves, the grand stone manor belonging to Longdale's burgomaster was located on the southern outskirts of the town, not too far from Grog's shack as the crow flies, or even as the unpleasantly bouncy ram gallops. Thetham slowed his mount to a trot as they approached the gates to the property. A small contingent of grim-faced Kingsguards were stationed there. They let Thetham pass without a word. He guided the ram right up to the front of the huge house and dismounted. "You need help?" Thetham asked, extending a hand towards Grog. "Nope," Grog said, wincing as he swung his left leg over the ram's back and slid to the ground beside Thetham. "I need a pipe." Thetham grinned, secured the reins of his mount to a pole, and began climbing the wide staircase which led to the front door. "I noticed that the Burgomaster's bloody mansion didn't get burned down last night," Grog said as he followed Thetham up the steps. "Neither did yours," Thetham countered. Grog tried to think of a clever retort. It hurt his head, and he came up blank, so he contented himself with growling a little and swearing under his breath. Once inside the house, Grog followed Thetham past more guards and into a large, opulent room. It had low bookshelves all along one wall, high windows, and a variety of fancy furniture, including 2 round tables. One of these was covered with platters of food, the other with an enormous map. Around this map stood 3 very important dwarves: the Burgomaster of Longdale, Broughton Gruntlog, and Gelgrum Brewblade, the King of Realm 2. There was also a fierce-looking dwarf with black battle paint, smeared in thick stripes under his eyes, standing by the windows, looking out over the lawns. "Thetham!" roared the king, raising his hands in greeting. "You're back! And you bring with you the great Malgrog Ironheart, scourge of mountain harpies, slayer of marauding giants, and trusted general of our beloved and much-missed High King Owen." If it had been anyone other than a king mentioning Owen and calling Grog his trusted general, Grog would probably have punched them in the face. But it was a king, so Grog just dipped his head in the merest of bows and mumbled, "Your Majesty." "Come in, you two, come in!" The king's hands were wildly animated as he gestured for Grog and Thetham to join them at the large table. "Come and help us save the kingdom." "Wait!" The king froze, clearly struck by a sudden and important thought. "Food! Drink! You must be starving. Come and have some of this spread." He walked over to the other table, his titanium chainmail clinking softly. You can't save the kingdom on an empty stomach, can you? Here, there's cold meats, relish, cheese, breads, fruits, and even some pastries here. All straight from the personal pantry of our gracious host. The burgomaster, who was even rounder than Grog, and had gold rings adorning his elaborately groomed blonde beard, smiled a smarmy, simpering smile, and bowed with a flourish. "Everything that is mine is yours, your grace." Grog headed for the food, making sure to give Broughton a look that said, "You're a bastard for dragging me into this," while the king was busy pointing out different sorts of mustard. "And this one is particularly hot," the king was saying. "Make sure to have a pint of ale handy if you want to try this one." Grog cleared his throat. Actually, Your Majesty, I sustained a few injuries in last night's battle, and Theetham here did promise me that there'd be some medicine here to help out with the pain." "Absolutely," said the king, standing up straight and adjusting the silver-link crown, which had fallen over his dark grey eyebrows. He stepped towards Grog, reached out, and placed gentle fingertips on either side of Grog's head. Then he tilted it left and right, while he ran his eyes over the blood-stained bandages. Again, if this had been any regular dwarf, Grog would have told them to bugger off. He may have even thrown a knee to the ghoulies for good measure. But as it was, he tolerated the king inspecting him like a mother might inspect a hurt child. "Luckily, they seem to have caught you right on the thickest part of the skull," the king said. "A bit lower and you'd be in serious trouble. Oh, I think you'll find that Maugrog is extremely thick-skulled, Your Highness," Broughton said, not looking up from the map. "It would take more than a clumsily wielded mace to get through that impenetrable head of his." The burgomaster chuckled. Grog considered throwing a cold chicken at the pompous bureaucrat, but settled on a filthy look. "No, lawkeeper," the king chided. "We're all friends here, and we're all meeting with a common goal. So eat up, Maugrog, and you too, Theetham." He turned to the burgomaster. "Have your staff fetch the general everything he may need to dull the pain of those nasty wounds. Then we can get down to business." A short while later, after Grog had smoked enough Nisan weed to sedate a sword-toothed dire-bear, and eaten 5 large custard-nut pastries, he found himself leaning unsteadily against the map-covered table, with a mug of whiskey in his hand, trying very hard to follow the intense conversation being held by the other dwarves. "Raven reports are coming in constantly," Broughton was saying. "The most recent attacks have taken place here, here, and here." He stabbed at various places on the map with his unbroken arm. Grog attempted, with a profound lack of success, to follow Broughton's movements through blurry, squinted eyes. "Realms 10 and 11 report heavy casualties," said the dwarf with the battle paint, who seemed to be some kind of military leader. "They were hit hard 2 nights ago, and even harder last night. I'll predict a full-scale evacuation from the outer realms to the inner realms within the next few days, if these attacks keep up. They just don't have the dwarves out there to withstand these onslaughts." "It's like the fog all over again," the burgomaster said, wringing his hands dramatically. "Only this time the mountains aren't saving us," said the king. "These buggers are suddenly everywhere, outer and inner realms. Which is why I was saying my theory is the most likely," Broughton said. "And I say it's impossible," said the military dwarf. "I agree with Major Hammerbuckle," said the burgomaster. "The Underrealms completely caved in nearly 50 years ago. None of those revolting mining dwarves could have survived the earthquake. Gods, we barely survived it even on the surface. And even if some of them had survived, where have they been for the last 50 years? What have they been doing, and how, in the name of the Ancient Ones, have they stayed alive without food, water, warmth, or sunlight all this time? It's just not possible. I know it sounds unlikely, said Broughton, but I think all the alternatives that have been offered are even more preposterous. Why is the thought of a secret necromantic cult living among us so very preposterous? Asked the burgomaster. At least I'm talking about real dwarves, not some ghosts of the past suddenly springing up out of the ground. Grog wasn't exactly sure what the others were talking about, but he thought that he covered this up well by sipping his whiskey in an extremely thoughtful manner and nodding from time to time. Maybe they came from beyond the outer mountains, said Theethum. Personally, I don't see why it matters. What matters is that we beat every last one of them into a bloody pulp. He reached back and patted the head of his billy club. Grog's eyes lingered on the grotesque weapon, which was a mistake, since the skeletal ram caught him looking and gave him a funny look back. It's looking at me! Grog held out hope for a moment that he just thought those words and not blurted them out loud. But all the other dwarves turned and stared at him. Grog bought himself some time by taking a long, pensive sip of whiskey. Then he pointed at the map. It's looking bad to me. He shook his head. Looking very, very bad. You're right, Malgrog, said the king, placing a hand on Grog's shoulder. This is a crisis, and it's only going to get worse. That's why we need your help. You want me to find the Faithbound? You were a member of the Northern Mountain Battalion for a good many years, yes? Grog nodded. There are few dwarves who've ever come into contact with the Faithbound, let alone dwarves who'd be able to find their way back up to them if they needed to. Broughton says that you'd be one of the dwarves that could. Grog glared at Broughton. Oh, he did he? He did. The king reached down, took the mug from Grog's hand, and drank the remaining whiskey in one swallow. He then shook the mug in the general direction of the burgomaster, who scurried forward to take it and refill it. These fuckers are coming for our homes, Grog, the king said, putting an arm around Grog's shoulders. They're killing families. Worse, they're killing them and then bringing them back to life as unholy ghouls. I've seen, Grog mumbled. They'll come again, Grog, said the king, turning to look Grog squarely in the eyes. All across the 13 realms, they'll come back. And you know better than most how badly the ranks of our warriors were thinned by the War of Fog. If there was any statement that could have snapped Grog temporarily out of his whiskey and weed-induced stupor, it was this. Of course I knew! He shouted. Broughton stiffened. Theethum even took a meaningful step towards Grog, but the king just smiled a kindly smile and smoothed his dark grey beard. No one blames you for what happened, General. There's not a dwarf alive or dead that could have claimed victory that day. The fact that there were any survivors is a testament to your leadership. Grog looked down at the floor. The sounds of battle echoed through his mind. The sounds of dwarves screaming, panicking, crying out for help. The sounds of dwarves and Kavina dying by the thousands. The sounds of his own cowardly voice, bellowing the words that no dwarven general had ever uttered in battle. Run. Retreat. Ha! Thank you, my good dwarf, said the king. Grog looked up to see the monarch taking an almost full mug of smolder whiskey from the burgomaster. He took a generous swig, breathed out a loud of hot whiskey breath, and offered the mug to Grog. Grog took the vessel, stared at the potent golden liquid sloshing around inside it, and found, to his amazement, that he didn't actually feel like anymore. "You think the Faithbound will actually come?" he asked. The king's ebony cloak rose and fell as he shrugged. "I certainly hope so, my friend. High King Ruinthor has personally written messages to be sent to all 4 priories. I believe he's offered the Archons any number of enticing reasons to bring their paladins down from the mountaintops to help out with this mess. If they refuse, I'm afraid we might be seriously fucked." "If only we knew what these dark dwarves wanted," Major Hammerbuckle said. "If only we could reason or negotiate with them." They want revenge," Grog said, as he looked out the window at the sinking sun and lengthening shadows. "Nothing more, nothing less." Despite his inebriation, Grog was still aware enough to notice the energy in the room shift. When he turned back to look at the other dwarves, they were all staring at him with furrowed brows. "What are you talking about?" Broughton asked. "What do you mean, revenge? Revenge for what? Why do you say that?" Grog held up a hand to try and calm the exasperated lawkeeper. "I don't know what for. It's what one of those mad bastards said last night." "You talked with him?" Major Hammerbuckle exploded, his face reddening. "When exactly were you planning on sharing this minor fucking detail?" "I just shared it. We've had 8 prisoners under interrogation for hours on end." The Major was shaking so much that his azure cap was in danger of toppling from his head. "We haven't gotten so much as a word out of him, but you actually had yourself a nice little chat with one of these bastards last night, and you didn't even think to tell anyone." "I didn't really think of it till just now," said Grog. "I don't know whether you noticed, but I had my head half caved in last night." He turned to face the king. "I'm sorry, Your Highness, I just forgot. How in the endless pit of darkness did you get one of them to talk?" the king asked, reaching absently for Grog's mug and taking another hefty swig. "Well, I think he was certain I was about to die, but then this Dire Forge maniac came along." Grog nodded at Broughton, "and kind of ruined his plans." "And what else did he say?" "Nothing really. Just that they were going to raise me up to be one of their undead things. It was a pretty short conversation." "Speaking of undead things, sire," Thethum said, "I think it's really time for us to be heading back to the Citadel. We're only a few hours away from nightfall." "I'd better go," the king said, handing the mug back to Grog. "My faithful bodyguard frets like a first-time mother if he thinks I'm putting myself in any danger." Thethum was indeed looking nervously back and forth between the king and the setting sun, his white-painted face twitching with agitation. "But what do we make of this revelation?" the burgomaster asked. "These invaders are here for revenge, but what does that mean? Do they simply intend to wipe us all out? Destroy every village and town? Turn every last one of us into one of those undead abominations?" A shiver ran across Grog's shoulders. He had the feeling that this was exactly what the invading dwarves had in mind. "We don't have time right now to discuss it further," Thethum said, an edge of anger creeping into his voice. "I'm taking the king back to the Citadel. Grog's heading north right now, and you'd better turn your mind towards the defense of Longdale for tonight." "I shall aid you with that, Burgomaster," Broughton said. "And if we make it through the night alive, I'll leave in the morning for Realm 1, there to consult with the High King." "Thank you, Lawkeeper," said the Burgomaster, whose eyes were bulging with fear. "Wait a second," Grog said, as his sluggish brain finally caught up with the implications of Thetham's words. "What do you mean, heading north right now? Do you mean like..." Grog gestured vaguely around the room. "Like now? Would you rather stay in Longdale tonight to help fight off another attack?" asked Major Hammerbuckle. The Southern Realms report that the first night of attacks there were exploratory strikes. The second night was far worse. "The quicker you leave, my friend," the king said, grabbing Grog by both shoulders and making him spill his whiskey, "the quicker you'll bring back a legion of armor-plated paladins who can help us drive these evil bastards back to wherever the fuck they came from." "We need to travel fast," said Major Hammerbuckle. "So I've put together only a small party. They're preparing for the expedition not far from here. And don't worry, General. I know you're hurt, so we've got all manner of medicine packed and ready for use if need be." "I'm not a general anymore," Grog mumbled, before forgetting that he didn't want any more whiskey, and taking several scalding swallows. "No, but you will be our guide," the Major said. "You do know the way to the Northern Priory, yes?" Grog said into his mug. "Pretty much." "He knows," Broughton said. "There's few dwarves that know these mountains better than Grog." "Why aren't you coming with me?" Grog pointed an unsteady finger at Broughton. "Because I've got a broken arm, you stupid bastard. Not the best for mountain climbing." Grog searched for a retort, but the king spoke first. "We're all set then? May the Ancient Ones be with us all. Strength and fortitude, dwarves!" Everyone echoed back the king's words, strength and fortitude, except for Grog, who was too busy grabbing pastries from the table of food. "We have packed provisions, Mao Grog," Major Hammerbuckle said, through gritted teeth. "You got any of these?" Grog held up the last of the custard nut pastries. The Major closed his eyes, clearly trying to fight down his annoyance. "Thatham," Grog said, "blade blunter is in the saddlebag on your goat." "We'll get it on the way out," said Thatham. All the dwarves began moving towards the door. "Malgrog," said the king, putting an arm around his shoulders and holding out a small scroll with his other hand. "I entrust this to you." "Oh no." Grog tried to wave the scroll away with his pastry-covered fingers. "Give it to Major Hammerbroken." "Hammerbuckle," came the angry correction from behind Grog. "No, I want you to take it," the king said, his voice suddenly grave and somber. "Owen trusted you for a reason, and I trust you too." Grog's first impulse was to shove the king away from himself, but instead he bit down on his lips so hard that he tasted blood. "You need to bring back those faith-born bastards, Malgrog." The king pressed the scroll into Grog's chest. "You won't let us down, will you?" Grog felt quite certain that he would let everyone down. In fact, placing one foot in front of the other and getting from the food table to the door was proving a bit of a struggle. However, he didn't think this information would inspire confidence in the king. So he just nodded, grunted, finished his mug of whiskey, and accepted the scroll, along with the hopes and expectations of every dwarf in all the 13 realms.